Good morning. I just had told Marjorie that I talk fast, so I'm going to try to talk a little bit slower, but since we're this session right before lunch, I don't think it'll be a huge deal if we get done a few minutes early. Today, we are going to cover some topics on homeless data collection. So for 1920 school year, we got some big changes coming. As everyone knows, homeless data entry was previously on the enrollment tab, which kind of caused some issues with, student records transfer, enrolling students from one year to the next. So we're going to cover today the new process. We're going to go over the definition and identification of homeless, that new process, how your historical data was converted, and the changes that this update has made to how we do student records transfer of homeless data. We'll cover briefly the QA homeless report, which is a valuable report that's in Infinite Campus, was put in last year, that really helps district folks if they get access to it and use it. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll end with the reporting timeline and what we do with the data. So we don't want you guys to think that, we have to enter all this data and KDE doesn't do anything with it. We have lots of federal reports that require the reporting of homeless students. So with that being said, we'll jump right in.
Okay, we're going to start with the definition and identification of homelessness. Children and youth who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. Some examples would be sharing housing due to loss of housing, economic hardship, or a similar reason, living in motels, hotels, trailer parks, or camping grounds due to lack of alternative adequate accommodations, living in emergency or transitional shelters, abandoned in hospitals, children and youth who have a primary nighttime residence that is in a public place not designed as a regular sleeping accommodation, are living in cars, parks, public spaces, abandoned buildings, substandard housing, bus, train stations, or similar settings. Migratory children who qualify as homeless because of their primary nighttime residence.
And that is the federal definition, the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness. So that's very standard, and of course that has not changed. So just keep that in mind.
Next, we'll cover the data entry. We have a new process for our data entry beginning with the 1920 school year. The homeless fields are no longer located on the enrollment tab. Now you'll find them. The new path is student information, program participation, and homeless. And you'll see on the right-hand side there's a little screenshot that shows you exactly how to find it.
And you'll want to make sure to make sure that your district administrators grant your homeless coordinators and anybody else that needs access to that this new location, because they will not automatically have access to that. Previously we had to give them access to enrollment tab, but now they'll actually have to have access to this program participation section. So that is something new that your homeless coordinators, DPPs, whoever in the district that needs that, go ahead and get that set up for them so that they can start familiarizing themselves with this new process, and also to see the historical data. That's where it would be located. Okay?
Moving on to creating a homeless record. Same path that I just covered. Student information, program participation, and then homeless. You'll select new to create a new record. These are all required fields. The primary nighttime residence indicator is from a drop-down list. Unaccompanied youth is also from a drop-down list. It's answer yes or no. The start date needs to be entered, and the start date is when the student was determined eligible for homeless services within the academic year. The end date auto-populates to 6/30 of the reporting year. This is something that needs to be left. Definitely don't change that. Once that's entered, you'll select Save.
So this is kind of new, just so you guys know. So primary nighttime residence replaced the living status that was on the enrollment tab. So the label has changed. This is matching, federal definitions and requirements. And the auto-populating of the 6/30 date, that is new. So basically, as we know, all homeless students have to be reevaluated with the beginning of the next school year. So we wrote this change in for Infinite Campus to do to where the record is automatically end dated as of the 6/30 of the reporting year in which they were identified. So that's all very new. So that's going to help hopefully with that tracking of the student records, some of the issues we had with the enrollment data entry.
Primary nighttime residence. Select the primary nighttime residence of the student at the time the student is determined eligible. The options are S for shelters and transitional housing, D for doubled up, U for unsheltered or inadequate housing, HM for hotels and motels. For unaccompanied youth, 2 conditions must be present for a child or youth to be considered an unaccompanied youth under the McKinney-Vento Act. The first one is the child or youth's living arrangements meets the Act's definition of homeless. And the second is the child or youth is not in a physical custody of a parent or guardian.
So there were a lot of questions about this unaccompanied youth. The standards last year wasn't very clear. So this is the actual federal definition. So first, before a student can be considered unaccompanied youth, they have to meet the definition of homelessness, right? So that's the first criteria. But then the second criteria is the child or youth is not in the physical custody of the parent or guardian. So that's the key to whether that student's, the answer on that drop list is yes or no, okay?
The student summary report is available via, the path to get to that is student information, program participation, homeless, and print summary report. The report generates a list of homeless records for the student.
Yeah, this is going to be a valuable report, especially with the transition, because this will give you the ability to look at the current homeless status of the student and any historical records the students had within your district. So this is kind of just a new report located on the same location as where you enter the data. Okay, so conversion of historical records. So as I've said, I guess 3 times in the last 10 minutes, the data was previously on the enrollment record of the student. So to keep that historical data, the conversion process, Infinite Campus is converting the data for us. They're going to be converting 1 homeless record for each year in which an enrollment record had homeless data. So if I am in Boone County, if I have a student in Boone County that had a homeless record under any enrollment within Boone County in the 18-19 school year, for example, then I will now also see a record for the 18-19 school year of homeless data under program participation. If they were homeless in 17-18, you'll see a record for 17-18. So that history is going to be converted to that program participation. So
It was done last night.
and it was done last night. So Wendy experienced that this morning when I went in to try to look at a homeless student. I was like, I can't see the enrollment data. So you're not going to be able to see homeless, even historical, on any enrollment in Infinite Campus now. To see that historical information, you have to go to the new path, which is student information program participation. So that is going to be a huge change. It's going to be a huge change on where they view the data and where they enter the data. So just make sure that you're communicating that with the right people in your districts. I know a lot of people are off for summer vacation this year. We have communicated it. We've updated the data standards, and I sent that notification out about 10 minutes before I started this presentation. So just make sure this is communicated, because again, it's going to be a big change. And you know, at the district level, when your homeless coordinators get in there and start trying to enter that data, they're going to be like, where do I go? Because it's at a completely different location. But again, like I said, the historical records will be there in that same location for them to see that. So any enrollment that had homeless data within your district will create a record here for historical purposes.
Becky, did the cleanup script run last night? Do we know?
I do not know.
Okay. So right now you might see the conversion process actually created a homeless record for every enrollment that had homeless indicators.
Mm-hmm.
But then we're gonna run a cleanup process to keep it, to get it down to just the last one, or sorry, the first one in the district. So you may see multiples now. Don't freak out when the multiples go away. We will be running the script, campus will be running a script that's gonna clean those up so that we don't have
Right.
5 in a district for the same year. It'll just make it easier to read. Because once a student is identified as homeless, they receive services for the entire year, so we don't need all the different records, but.
Okay, so basically, as Lisa said, there's a cleanup script that's gonna be ran. We're not sure, we're having some Infinite Campus issues this morning, being able to log in and verify this, but the conversion, that cleanup will narrow it down to just one record per year in your district, as opposed to, 5 or 6 records because you had 5 or 6 enrollments for these very transient students. Thank you, Lisa.
Quick question.
Yes.
If a student is clearly homeless qualified and is not with a parent but is 18 or older, are they considered unaccompanied?
If they meet the definition of homelessness and they're still school age, then yes, they would meet the definition of unaccompanied youth. Did I answer that? Okay. Any other questions so far?
Only one.
Okay, so student records transfer. This is a big change too, okay? As, the homeless data will now transfer as a summary via the student records transfer process. So previously, clerks or, enrollment persons handling your student records transfer had to run an import wizard to get that homeless data from a previous district. That will not be the case anymore. It's going to be a transfer document, which means that the receiving district will have to create a new homeless record in their district database for there to actually be data. Because what you're going to end up getting this time now is a PDF document, okay? I don't know how familiar everyone is with the transfer documents, but it's a PDF as opposed to actually importing data. One of the pros to this is, of course, there used to be issues with school-to-school transfers, because the enrollment from one record to the next was not transferring. So we were losing that transfer of data within the district. So that will no longer be an issue because, of course, it's not tied to enrollments any longer, but there is this new process for district-to-district transfer, where again, it is going to be a transfer document, a PDF document that that will come in with the student's record. With that being said, the new record that's created in the receiving district they should enter the primary nighttime residence, and the unaccompanied youth data should be entered based on what's on that transfer document, okay? Because once a student's identified as homeless, their primary nighttime residence and their unaccompanied youth should not change that academic year, even if it realistically changes, if that makes sense. So if a student goes from a shelter to doubled up with a friend, the shelter is the reporting primary nighttime residence. So you should enter that data exactly the same. The start date should be updated to reflect the date in which the student enrolled in the receiving district. So when that district picked up the homeless eligibility services is the start date. So the start date is the only thing that you would alter from that transfer document. Again, the end date will auto-populate to 6/30 of the reporting year, and that should not be changed. And I think I kind of already said this, but I'll just reiterate it. So subsequent enrollments. Once a student is identified as homeless, the student's homeless record, including their nighttime resident status and their unaccompanied youth status, should remain selected in the student's record for the remainder of the academic year, regardless of his or her status changes. So a student can be in a shelter, in November of the school year, and then by, January of the school year, they are back in a home and they're no longer really meeting the definition of homeless. It does not matter. They're still eligible for services the entire academic year. So none of that should change. Okay? If I move from one district to the next, I'm homeless in a shelter in Anderson County, and I move to Woodford County into a house, and I'm no longer meeting the definition of homeless, Woodford County still has to provide me homeless services because I'm eligible for the entire academic year. So, and this includes, I didn't get that. This includes students placed in a facility or group home enrollment subsequent to the identification of homeless in the current school year. So we get this a lot. A student is identified as homeless, and then they're placed into a residential facility or a group home or some kind of KECSAC facility. They are still considered homeless even though they're living in a residential home or a group home. So that's basically what that's saying. A lot of people a lot of districts are kind of wanting to take off that homelessness. We're providing them a residence, but that's not the case because they have to be considered homeless for the entire academic year. Okay, so now I'm gonna dive in a little bit to that QA homeless report. There are two versions of the report. There's a detailed version and an aggregate version. And I have to admit that when these first come out, I wasn't a big fan of them, but now I love it. I mean, they're really valuable reports. And previously to 18-19 school year, you had probably 5 or 6 ad hoc reports that you had to run to kind of clean up your homeless data. This one report replaced all of those ad hoc reports. So make sure that the people in your district have access to this report that should. Your homeless coordinators. I talked to a homeless coordinator just 2 months ago that had never seen this report and was still trying to run all the ad hoc reports. So make sure they have access to it. You will have to grant user rights. But basically, this report is located under Kentucky State Reporting, KDE reports, and it's called QA Homeless for Quality Assurance Homeless. So the report detail version provides a list of homeless students that will be used for state and federal reporting purposes. So the list of students that you get generated on this report for your district is what we will be using for school report card, what we'll be using to report to the federal government for McKinney-Vento or other federal reporting requirements. The detail report will provide student level data with highlighted elements, this is the key, that indicate data quality issues, okay? So if I have a homeless student reported on this report and they are not designated as free lunch, because all homeless students should be receiving free lunch, then that economically disadvantaged field will be highlighted to show you that, hey, this kid is on full price lunch or reduced price lunch. This is a data quality issue that needs to be cleaned up in the system. A homeless student whose enrollment, and I thought we fixed that, whose record does not have an active primary nighttime residence. So right now, primary nighttime residence is a required field, but we have somehow districts that are kind of getting around that, and we do have records that the student is deemed as homeless, but they don't have a primary nighttime residence selected. So if that is the case, then that living status field will be highlighted, letting you know that that student needs the appropriate living status added. Another issue I have found, and this had to do a lot with the student records transfer, so I'm hoping it kind of cleans up this year, is that field would be blank, that living status would be highlighted and would be blank if, one, they didn't have a living status selected, or if the record had one of the old living statuses selected. So we had to reach out to a lot of districts, and I say Marjorie had to reach out to a lot of districts this spring to let them know, hey, you've got a homeless student with the old living status, which means it's not going to count in our data. So that will help with that cleanup as well. And the same for unaccompanied youth. So I'm homeless, but I don't have yes or no selected in the unaccompanied youth. So this is a valuable report. Strongly recommend that all homeless coordinators have access to it, and any administrators in the district that need that information as well. So that's it. So then we'll go into free lunch status, which I said already. You'll want to use that report and filter on economically disadvantaged on that column to make sure that there aren't students that are not on free lunch. And then you'll need to work with your FRAM coordinator to make sure that that record's updated in Infinite Campus and that the student is receiving the services that they're eligible for. The homeless report aggregate version. So if you go to the same path, the same location, Kentucky State Reporting, KDE reports, and then the QA homeless, there will be an option to select the aggregate report. This report is a PDF version, and I forgot to say earlier that the detail is a Excel CSV file, so that helps you to be able to filter and stuff. This particular report is just a PDF version, and it contains unduplicated counts of students identified as homeless anytime within the reporting year. And this report calculates the percentage of homeless students by gender and race, ethnicity by grade, and by living status and unaccompanied youth. So this is one of those kind of pretty reports that you would want to share with like leadership, and for awareness, you could share it with your board, anything like that. It's one of those, like I said, a pretty PDF report that kind of gives you aggregate details with percentages based on your membership. And this is just an example of the one section of that aggregate report, which breaks down homeless student counts by grade level and demographic group. And as you can see, it calculates percentages based on, again, based on membership. And then the second part of that aggregate, this is a screenshot that shows those same counts and percentages only by primary nighttime residents and unaccompanied youth. So it's valuable information to see at a higher level, probably.
And the count chart should match what you're seeing on school report card.
Yes.
So if you're saying my school report card numbers don't look right, look at the aggregate and then back up to detail to see who's missing. If
Yeah, we're getting ready to start rolling out school report card for 18-19. And when we do, when the homeless data is loaded, these reports will be valuable in districts being able to verify their school report card data. And then this is the third part of the aggregate report, which is homeless counts by student group. So economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, English learners, et cetera.
Okay, data validation, just a couple of notes. Validate homeless records to ensure accuracy for school report card and other federal state reporting, as Wendy has mentioned. The district homeless liaison coordinators should ensure the correct students are reported, including withdrawn students. If homeless indicators were imported from prior year data, the homeless liaison should review the homeless status in the current year and create a new record via the program participation homeless as needed. The reporting timeline and data uses. Homeless data should be complete and accurate by June 30th annually. KDE extracts homeless data July the 1st annually from the district data warehouse. Just a note, the data submission, there's no data submission required. Homeless data is used for public reporting via school report card and to meet federal reporting requirements.
And so we, as you can see, based on the dates, we have just pulled 18-19 verifications closed, and we literally last week just pulled the homeless data for us to use for school report card and federal reporting. So if you get back to your district and you speak with your homeless coordinator and they're like, we need to make some changes to our data, you'll want to notify us, because we would then have to refresh the data to make sure we get the most accurate to report. And if you have any questions, the program-related questions, McKinney-Vento program-related questions regarding homeless, the new contact for that is Melissa Farrell, and that's her email address and her phone number. For data quality issues or reporting issues within Infinite Campus, Marja Lee will be your first line of contact, and I'll always assist if she needs it, or you can email me if needed as well. We have any questions?
Just a few.
Okay.
Will the homeless document transfer on to a district even if the prior district didn't do anything with theirs?
Well, that's more of a student records transfer question. My understanding about how student records transfer works is that if the prior district did not import records, then those records would not be in the next district to import. Is that correct? So
We've tested it. The transfer document that you will get will only be homeless status from any records that are under program participation homeless in that district. So if the child had multiple records over multiple years, you would see them all. But it won't be from another district. It won't pull several districts together. It'll be just that last district's what records they have. So.
okay. So so to answer the question, I think, is the transfer document will reflect the district's last homeless indication. Correct? Okay.
Okay. If students in a KEXAC facility are homeless, should the unaccompanied youth status be yes or no?
It would be, if the unaccompanied youth status would still be based on that same definition. Are they still in the custody of a parent or guardian? If they're not, then they meet the definition of unaccompanied youth, and it would be yes.
Wendy, wouldn't they, it's whatever they were identified as before they came into the facility, right?
Yes,
It
same as
doesn't
what we,
change based on
yeah,
their
same as what we
facility.
said earlier. If the status was yes or no at the time of identification within that current school year, then it would not change just because they're placed in a KEXAC facility. Exactly right.
Okay. Just for clarification, when a student moves into our district that was marked homeless in the previous district, We go by the transfer document and create a new homeless record, even if they are not homeless in our district.
That is correct, if it's within the same academic year.
If students are in a KEXAC facility, how would you mark the primary nighttime status?
Again, you would not change the primary nighttime status or the unaccompanied youth status if they were identified prior to going into the KEXAC facility. I want to reiterate that just a little bit. Just because a student is in a KEXAC facility does not mean they're deemed homeless. They're not eligible for services just because they're in a special care facility. That's no longer part of the definition of homelessness, and I think that's where a lot of this is coming from. There's confusion there.
That's all the questions I see on Go Soapbox. Any questions here in the room? Okay.